Hey folks, and how are you doing today? Now, welcome to this episode of The Grow Show. Now, we have had a couple of months break between the last episode and this episode, but we're back. We are back, and we are back with a fantastic guest who's going to be sharing some really cool nuggets of information for you. Now, if you're new to The Grow Show, then first of all, I want to say thank you very much for tuning in. And second of all, The Grow Show is here to help you discover what's inside you already. It literally is. We want you to come away with ideas to help you grow, hence the name. Now, we're going to be doing that by talking to people who have been there and done that. They've lived many, many lives in different industries. And guess what? They're going to share with you little nuggets of information that's going to help you grow. So today, I'm joined by Dave Heffernan, and we are going to be talking about a little bit about his past, but more importantly, about his future and about what he's going to be doing to make sure he's got the best future possible for him with the circumstances that he's living with. And you will hopefully walk away today with a few ideas about how you can control what you can control, and also really figure out to yourself, are you living your life the most you can? Just had a chat with Dave pre-roll, and it was absolutely fantastic, and I can't wait to get him in. So without further ado, let's bring Dave in. So Dave, how are you doing, sir? How are you getting on?
I'm very good, thank you. It's a bit cold, a bit wintry, but the heating's on. Who needs to pay the bill?
The heating's on here as well. We've got the dogs are all walked and all kind of sleepy, so we are all good to go. So, for the people who don't know you, tell us a little bit about you and about kind of what you do on a day-to-day basis before we get into the nuts and bolts of the kind of the main chat.
Right, okay, so my day job really is mental health workshops and training for corporates and to schools as well. I do a lot of work with schools. I'm a qualified certified hypnotherapist as well, which is fantastic. And I do a lot of keynote talks, which I love doing in front of small and big audiences, all around mental health, resilience, anxiety.
Nice. And we've spoken, well, we people can tune into a previous episode of you on the Grow Show, which talks about your journey and your history a little bit more. And also, we were lucky enough for you to speak at the previous Grow Live in 2021 as well, which was fantastic and still goes down as one of the best talks I've ever heard. Not just kind of in a networking arena, just generally a damn good, great talk. So thank you for that. So what do you want to talk about today? What was your kind of what we spoke about before about your journey and that kind of stuff? So we can recap a little bit about that for people who don't know you. But what do you really want to focus on today?
I would say choices and control. People appear to have given quite a lot of control away, and they've given up a lot of hope, especially in the last couple of years with the pandemic and COVID. A lot of people out there feeling hopeless and helpless. So I want to just help people take back control and understand that they do still have choices to ensure that their life is the life that they design and not what's designed for them. So yeah, choices and control.
Brilliant. Now, for the people who don't know your backstory or how you got to this point, can we just quickly recap it just for the people who don't know? Because I think that really kind of leads really nicely into what your kind of thoughts about controlling the controllables and actually to make sure that you are getting the most out of life. So tell us a little bit about how you got to this stage.
So basically, I've had quite a varied and unique background. So first instance, I was 5 years old. I ended up being an altar boy for a Catholic church in Salford. It was a very rough council estate that I grew up in. And I became an altar boy at 5 years old, and I served my very first funeral at 5 years old. Between the age of 5 and 18, I'd served over 3,000 funerals, and I spoke to literally hundreds of people who were grieving at a very young age. About the age of 8, I started listening to people, adults, who just share the grief with me and their issues with me. And although I couldn't give them advice, I could listen. And all I kept on hearing was regret. I wish they. And that had a massive impact on my life. And from that point on, I said that I'm never going to have regret in my life, because quite simply, I knew how toxic that word was based on the conversation that I had with so many grieving adults. Moving forward, I was homeless at the age of 16 for 2 years. I lived above drug dealer squats. I lived in cemeteries. I lived on the proverbial park bench, and during that time, I set up a childcare club and got my A levels. So again, I always had the choice on how I perceived my life back then and what I wanted to do. I had no plan B. Moving forward, I got arrested for arson. I eventually got cleared. It turned out to be a drug dealer who I was living with, who did it on my behalf, but didn't tell me. So I was eventually cleared. That gave me a great lesson about prejudging and not judging people based on, you know, who they are at that moment. Everybody's got a story. So I'm always learning these lessons. I ended up living in the Lake District for a year, lived in a tent, living off the land through all 4 seasons. That's helped me develop and create the Time to Breathe Wild Camping Retreat that I'm going to be running in 2023. And then moving forward again, I lived in Essex for 3 years. I've had several death threats. I worked in the red light districts in Manchester doing outreach work. I've had 3 broken jaws, and more recently, which I'm going to be talking about over the next 20 minutes or so, is I was diagnosed with a rare form of motor neuron disease, severe spinal canal stenosis, and a paralyzed diaphragm. Was told by a consultant a couple of years back that if I was to go down the surgical route, I would most certainly die. But if I didn't, I would most certainly be paralyzed. So again, choices: I can either sink or I can swim and survive and thrive. And that's what I'm doing at the moment. That's me in a nutshell.
It's brilliant, and there's so many bits to kind of pick and choose from now. But we're here to talk about the future. But I've just got one question for you, just while I've got it in my mind. When's the film coming out? Because you need a film about your life, about the stories and experiences that you've been on.
I keep on getting told I need to write a book, and I'm looking at doing that. I've got this idea. There's 2 ideas that I want for the book, and the first one is an upside down book. So the first part is my autobiography, for want of a better word, and then you turn it upside down, and the next half of the book is around sort of life coaching, taking my decisions that I made, the choices that I made, and basically working through each one and showing the positives and the learning curves from each experience that we've gone through. I've been through quite a few traumatic experiences in my time, and I guarantee that there are positives and learning curves in everything we go through, and we just focus on the negatives. So the second half of the book will be some more life coaching, that side of things. The second book that I want to do is like the old, I don't know whether this is the right thing to say, but the old Dungeons and Dragons, where you'd be put into a particular experience. You may be going through a maze, and it'll say, right, turn left, page 27, turn right, page 36. And it will then, based on which page you go to, will be a different decision, a different outcome. So I want to take each experience and each decision that I made and turn it into one of those kind of books. But that's way down the line because I've not got the inclination or time to really focus on that. But I am working on that first book as we speak.
That's brilliant.
As for the form, if anybody wants it, give me a few $100,000. I'll be happy to take it. Write it for me.
It's one of those stories where, and it's not even a story, it's your life. This is your life that you've been through. So, you know, there's no downplaying it. These are all circumstances which make up each individual part of what you've just said before about your journey. Each of them could have made or break you quite easily. And you've always chosen to kind of look at the choices and kind of go for what you believe is the right thing to do, and that gives you the best chance for kind of survival. Even down to kind of the drug dealer burning down your house on your behalf that you didn't know about, and you've still got a lesson from that. Have you always been like that? Have you always had that kind of foresight to think, okay, we're going through shit now, but there's gonna be a lesson here somewhere?
I feel quite blessed in the fact that in my early life, in my youth, I had several strong role models. So like the first one was the priest. I'm not practicing Catholic anymore. I'm more spiritual. But I remember 8 years old asking the priest, you know, how do I live a life of no regret? Because between the age of 5 and 8, all I kept on hearing was this: I wish they. And rather than sort of tell me to go away, he sat me down and he said, look, in order to live a life of no regret, you need to make peace with your decisions, both good and bad, immediately. So from an age of 8 years old, to have that level of insight and level of sort of support was incredible. And I remember walking out of that church, shaking my head like it was absolute psychotic, saying no regret, no regret. And that had a massive impact. That conditioned me. So from a very young age, I was blessed for the fact that there were good people, sliding doors moments where I was able to take that message and use it in future. So anything that I do now, I always go back to that 8-year-old child and that question, how do I live a life of no regret? And I always go back to that answer and I use it. And I make peace with everything I do. And I've made some crap decisions, which has got me into some real bad scrapes. But as I say, I guarantee there's always a positive and a learning curve. And I'd rather choose to focus on that than the negative, because I know which way, I've attempted to take my life at one point. That was a choice that I made at the time, which wasn't a great choice. You know what I mean? So I know how important it is to keep control of that mind and know that there are options. And I choose the positive options rather than negative and focus on that.
Again, you make it sound so straightforward. And for many people, it's not. And no one likes to hear that someone tried to attempt to kind of take their own life. And you've admitted that it was a bad decision at the time to do that. If, let's say, you were able to kind of go back and have a few words with Dave at that time, would it have made any difference whatsoever with this mindset that you had? Because obviously your mindset's kind of strengthened over time, but would it have made a big difference at that point in time?
I think looking back at that time, I was very isolated. I had nobody around me. So I had nobody to listen. A lot of my life has been about active listening. It's not been about talking. And so if somebody gave me advice back then, I wouldn't have listened. But if they would have listened and they would have heard me without judgment, then that would have made a massive difference. And I've supported over 2,000 people over the years who have been suicidal at the lowest ebb, and not once have I saved them or helped them by talking. It's always been about listening. So if I had somebody back then who was able to take me to the side and hear me, then that would have made a massive difference. But I had nobody back then. And I was talking to my wife recently because we went through a rough patch. My wife's father passed away recently and she's grieving. And we went for a really big rough patch. And she was asking me about me. I said, what about you? I said, we never hear about you and your sort of being upset or anything. I said, I deal with it. I've got the sort of strength to deal with it. And it dawned on me, what? Even now, after all these years, I don't offload to anybody. I've always been myself. And, it's strange because I tell everybody to sort of offload and help, be helped by people and talk to people. But I've always had that sort of mental strength to just deal with it, because it's important that I put on my own oxygen mask, because while my wife is grieving or my sons are going through, their trauma, my son's been diagnosed with autism and he's had his own challenges going into college. If I don't put my own oxygen mask on first and look after myself, then I'm not going to be able to help them. So I always just go away and work on myself and make sure that I'm in the best possible position to help others. But yeah, that was a lesson that I've learned recently, that over the years, I've never sought help from anybody. I've always sort of looked at, and that's not the advice I give to anybody, you know what I mean? But I've had to go through the biggest amount of crap to get to this place where I am able to do that. It's not all in a bed of roses. One thing I'm very sort of straight talking about is this is not just easy sailing. I've had to go through the biggest amount of crap you could ever imagine to get to this mindset. Jim Rohn said, after every recession, there's growth, and after the darkest hour, there's glorious sunrise. And that stays with me all the time. Even when I'm going through a dark patch, I know there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel. I know there's going to be growth at the end of this. I just need to focus on the right things. And as long as I focus on the right things, the positives and the learning curves, then I move forward. My life is littered with these lessons, and it's been proven. So I use these strategies now to help other people. based on a lived experience. You know, there's no textbook in this. There's no sort of me doing a psychology degree or anything like that. You know, I've got the mindfulness qualifications, got the hypnotherapy qualification, all that sort of stuff. But this is very much lived experience.
So let's kind of over the last couple of years, you've kind of decided to really push yourself kind of health wise and fitness wise. And this kind of leads on to kind of links up with what you're planning to do in the future and that kind of stuff. So let's have a little chat about that. You know, what have you been up to over the last couple of years? More importantly, why did you decide that was the right time to do it?
It's a good question. I went to New York in 2019, and my bucket list place is my heaven. And I was on top of the Empire State Building, looking out to the Statue of Liberty, and my friend took a picture of me and my wife, and I looked huge. It was awful. And I remember thinking, this has just ruined what should be an iconic image of me standing on top of the Empire State Building with the Statue of Liberty in front of me. That's my dream sort of picture. And all I could see was just how big it got. And I'd become comfortable. I'd become conditioned just to sort of emotionally eat, boredom eat. You know, we had the pandemic coming up, and it was just crazy. So it was looking at that picture, I decided to make the change. I thought, you know what, you know, the camera doesn't lie. So over the last couple of years, as I say, I've been diagnosed with a motor neurone, a rare form of motor neurone. It's called progressive muscular atrophy. I've also got the severe spinal canal stenosis and the paralyzed diaphragm with 30% vital lung capacity. So I would convince myself that exercise, I couldn't do anything. But the more I started going to Salford Red Devils again with my son, I got in touch with the Salford Red Devils Foundation, and they were running sort of physical disability rugby league. So I decided to have a crack at that. And in physical disability rugby league, you've got it's full contact, but two players can wear red shorts, which means they cannot be tackled. They wear tags and they have to be tagged. And that gave me an opening to be able to go and play this, because with my back problem, if I got tackled and I went to the ground, there's a chance that I would be paralyzed. So there's no way I could risk that. But the fact that it was so inclusive that they had these red shorts, I was able to play. So I started playing physical disability rugby. And then my son started playing at Witton Albion, the disability rugby there, disability football there, sorry. And they were short players, so one of the coaches said, do you want to play? So I said, yeah. So I've got a disability anyway, so I might as well play. And so I started playing that. And after a couple of weeks, I really enjoyed. My mental health completely changed in the fact that I was loving this. Seeing the smiles on the faces of the kids and the young adults who had cerebral palsy, who had Down syndrome, who was deaf and various other disabilities, and they just had these massive smiles on their face, and it was infectious. So I started attending that, and then my wife put me forward for an over 50s football, just down the road in Knutsford, and I'm not even over 50 yet. I'm only 48. So I went along to that because it was supposed to be walking football, and I've not walked once since I've been playing it. It's just been full contact. It's been crazy.
Yeah.
And then my son started playing badminton at college, and he said, "Oh, Dad, I want to go to badminton." And just as if Facebook is listening, put an advert on for a local badminton club doing badminton sessions. So now on a Monday, I play football for Witton Albion. On a Tuesday, I do training for Salford Red Devils. On a Wednesday, I play badminton. On a Friday, I play Edgerton football. And on a weekend, when the rugby season's playing, I do festivals all over the UK. With Salford Red Devils as well, which is ludicrous. So I have Thursdays off and a Sunday off. And in that time, I've lost just short of 5 stone. It's incredible. I've reversed my diabetes. And I just feel so much healthier mentally as a result of doing this. Yes, I'm knackered. When I finally sit down, I'm in agony. I can't stand up straight. So ultimately, I will end up being paralyzed. But I remember a friend of mine who's in networking, Carl Ford, I remember him asking me the question about a year ago, because I'd just completed a virtual Mount Everest walk. And since then, I've done a Great Wall of China walk as well. I said, why are you doing this when you know you're going to end up in a wheelchair? And I said, look, I'd rather end up in a wheelchair and have no regrets and think when my legs were working, I didn't do anything with it. So I'd rather sort of suck them out of life and just go for it. And at least when I do end up in a wheelchair, life will be good, because I won't be overplaying in my mind, shit, I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have done that. Those words, I wish, is never, ever going to enter my mind.
No. Well, you'll have no regrets at that point.
I had no regrets at that point. And as I said to you before, Salford Red Devils now just got funding for wheelchair rugby anyway. So at least I've got a natural progression. If I do end up in a wheelchair, I've got wheelchair rugby to look forward to. So there's no negatives for me. There's no negatives. And I remember saying to the spinal consultant 2 years ago, he said to me, Dave, if you was to go down the surgical route, which is the only option available to yourself, you may as well book into Dignitas beforehand, because at least you'll have a nice holiday to Switzerland before. And so basically we're saying, if I go for spinal surgery, I will be dead on the operating table. And I shook him by the hand and I said to him, I am so grateful you talked to me in that manner, in that straightforward manner. I said, why? He said, because I want to be the best role model I can be to my kids. I want to be the best husband I can be to my wife. And I can't be any kind of husband or father on a mortuary slab, but I can be a great father still in a wheelchair. So why would I not be grateful? And that's the first part of call that I always have now is, what can I be grateful for? What are the positives here? There's no purpose in putting energy into stuff that I cannot control. But what I can control is, whilst I've got legs that are working, whilst I've still got a brain that's working, I can make the most out of my life. And that's what I want to do. So when I do end up in that wheelchair, or if I do end up in that wheelchair, regret is not one of the things I'm thinking about.
And does that motivation, that kind of mindset really help on those days where you really don't want to do it? You don't want to go out. You don't want to, it's raining, cats and dogs out there. It's wet as anything, or it's cold, or you're not feeling good. Your body's not reacting well. Does it really kind of help you push on for that? Or does it just kind of give you a bit of spurt?
Yeah, I listen to my body. If I pull my back on weekend, just gone, and I was lying in bed and something went, and I literally couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't stand up straight. So you have to listen to your body. There's some things, because it's physical. If I can't physically walk at the time, or if I physically can't, stand up straight, then there's no point in doing it. But whilst I've still got that energy, whilst I've still got that ability to walk and stand straight, I do a lot of self-hypnosis. I work on pain management through hypnosis, and that gets rid of all the unnecessary pain, because we overcompensate. If I've got pain in the left-hand side of my back, I'll be overcompensating on my right. So I do a lot of work on that. But yeah, I want to squeeze as much out of my life as possible. And whilst I've got the ability, like last night, it was freezing. I was at Eccles College with Salford Red Devils Foundation, and it was freezing, and I could feel my back stiffening up. So I didn't do as much as the others. I was still doing the training and stuff like that, but I wasn't throwing myself into it as much. But I was still out there, because I was still seeing my sons who do the learning disability rugby with Salford. I could still see them smiling and laughing. I could see all the other children laughing and smiling, and all the other coaches and what have you. So it's like, well, this gives me life. You know what I mean? So if I would have been sat at home, all I would have been thinking about at the time was how much fun they were having anyway. So I might as well be there and witness it.
Love it. Love it. And just for kind of clarity for everyone listening and watching, we're recording this on 23rd of November, and this will be going out probably the first week or second week of January. So I'm really interested to kind of hear your thoughts on, if someone's kind of starting to kind of, they're listening to this, they might not be in the best of health or best of kind of mindset at the moment. What what advice would you give to them at this stage, knowing what you've known and living the life that you've led so far?
Well, the second week of January is going to be cold and miserable anyway, so people want to hibernate. They won't want to get out and do any exercise or do any running or anything like that. What I will say is, the benefits far outweigh the temporary pain that you're going to go through. So many people procrastinate with exercise. I did myself. I was like, well, what if I start having more issues with my back? What if people don't understand that I've got complex issues or whatever? So you talk yourself out of it. It was Mel Robbins, I think it was, who said the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you're going to make a decision, just count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So get your trainers on, get your gym gear or whatever, and then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and get out the door. Don't allow your brain to engage, because that will guaranteed it will try and talk you out of it. So just go and do it. Your future self will thank you for it. When I was 5 stone heavier, I could not really at that point see me being 5 stone lighter. But after a couple of weeks of going out and playing football, playing rugby, and realizing, actually, you know what, I'm getting a bit more fitter here, I could visualize myself. I could see myself being 5 stone lighter. And that little bit of hope is enough for you to grab onto and just widen open and see that big white light. It's just do it, as Nike say, just do it. Start. Don't procrastinate. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Get out the door. There are so many sports now that are inclusive.